Senator Gallivan called me to ask if we'd be interested in hosting this roundtable. It was an immediate yes for us here at Hilbert College. Senator Gallivan has represented Western New York so incredibly well for a very long time as a trooper, as sheriff, and now in the New York State Senate. So we're just super lucky to have a guy like Senator Patrick Gallivan representing us here in Western New York. Very grateful to him and to Senator Dean Murray. Welcome to Western New York. You're getting treated to some good snowbanks, maybe more than you get down on Long Island. Hopefully you're getting out pretty soon because the weather's going to get worse soon, but welcome to Western New York. We're glad you're here. And we're grateful for your leadership in this really important conversation. Your commitment to listening to victims, to advocates, service providers, and those working on the front lines matters deeply. And we're honored that you chose Hilbert College to be the place for that conversation. Hilbert was founded by the Franciscan Sisters of St. Joseph, who live right across the street from here, and they still hold an important place in our hearts and here at college. And they started in the early 1900s with a very clear mission: to prepare our young people for lives of purpose and service and real impact in their communities. And that mission lives on today through criminal justice, cybersecurity, forensic science, human services, and counseling-related programs, and through partnerships with agencies and professionals who do the hard work of supporting victims and strengthening communities. Hilbert College, through our one-of-a-kind digital media and communication programs, trains students to tell the stories that matter in the world and make sure that the stories that we tell are seen. Many of the people in this room are dedicated in their careers to walking alongside individuals and families during some of the most difficult moments of their lives and make sure that their stories are heard, which is what we're here for today. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for what you do. Today is about learning from one another, identifying where systems can do better, and shaping policies that are grounded not just in the law, but in dignity and empathy and in justice. So thank you again to Senators Gallivan and Murray for your leadership, and to all of you for being here today and for the work that you do every day. We're proud to host, and we look forward to a thoughtful and productive conversation. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Senator Gallivan for his remarks.
Thank you, President Cornell, and thank you, Hilbert College, and everybody who was part of the team here in helping to put this together. I'm thrilled that I do represent, among other places in Erie County, the town of Hamburg and this particular campus, and have had a longstanding association in my time as the former sheriff of Erie County in the criminal justice program. So we are thrilled to be here. I am, as you heard, Senator Pat Gallivan. I have been in the Senate a number of years. My background is criminal justice, so anytime that we talk about anything related to criminal justice or crime victims, it's very near and dear to my heart. And simply put, I think we can do it much better in New York State. I'm joined today by Senator Dean Murray, who is a senator out on Long Island and somehow thread that needle to get here between the snow to the north and the snow to the south to be here today. But he also sits on the Senate Standing Committee on Crime, Crime Victims, and Corrections. So this is a series of hearings, or of roundtables rather, that are being held in different areas of the state, Long Island, Hudson Valley out here in Western New York, among other places. And the idea is to do better by crime victims. We unfortunately have seen in the state over the last 7 or 8 years policies that I think have left crime victims alone and have focused more on offenders rather than law-abiding citizens, and rather than focusing on keeping our communities safe. And we're trying to do something about it. So the idea is, the series of roundtables, including today, is to hear from those that touch crime victims, whether it's prosecutors, law enforcement, crime victim service agencies, crime victims advocates, and victims themselves, to hear about their experiences, about what they think we collectively in the state may be doing well, about where we're lacking, what we can do better. And the ultimate goal through all of this is when we're finished with these hearings is that we will work with some of our colleagues to put together policy recommendations, whether it's in the form of proposals for the budget or proposals for changes in the law to ultimately better serve crime victims and work harder to reduce victimization. So before we get started, I want to welcome Senator Murray to Western New York, and I'd ask him to say a few words.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Senator Gallivan. Thank you to the senator and his staff for putting this together. Thank you to Hilbert College and everyone here for allowing us to be here. And this is, as Senator Gallivan said, this is the second in a series of these types of events that we're holding around the state to gather information. As he said, the state has gone, in my opinion, this is me speaking for myself, in the wrong direction in that we've become very focused on pro-criminal legislation. I'm all for, let me be very clear, all for rehabilitation. But let me be also clear about the fact that the victims deserve that too. The victims need to rehabilitate themselves and recover from what they've experienced. Some of these crimes that occur are literally a life sentence for these crime victims. They don't get a second chance in many cases, or their loved ones. They don't get a second chance. Now we have some victims advocates across the state who do an amazing job, but we don't do enough to help them either. Somebody needs to be there for the victim, but not just in the sense of, as I said, recovering from what they've experienced. They need to feel justice, and they're not. And that's what we're hearing so far. A little of my background, as Senator Gallivan said, I do sit on both the Codes Committee, which handles many of the legislation that deal with punishment, but also on the Crime Victims, Crime and Corrections Committee. Personally, before getting into politics, I own a small advertising agency, and that agency focuses on specialty publications and websites. One of them in particular that I still have is called the Long Island Fugitive Finder. And what it is mostly, it's similar to America's Most Wanted. We used to have a magazine, but COVID kind of knocked that out, but we're still online, still have the website, and I work with Crime Stoppers and the Nassau County Police, Suffolk County Police, and sometimes the U.S. Marshals. And they'll send me their most wanted fugitives each month, along with some crimes that they need help with solving. We'll put that up on the site, and if someone calls in a tip and it results in someone getting captured or recaptured, they get a reward. So it works out very well. We've been doing this for quite some time, and I'm proud to say that we've helped the police get close to 2,000 fugitives off the streets and back behind bars. So it's been very successful, but I tell that story only because I want you to know how near and dear this issue is to my heart. And this is why we wanted to do these hearings and roundtables, and why it's important we hear from law enforcement, from the crime victims themselves, from the victims advocates. We need to hear it all so that we can do our job better. And I think the job that we have to do, as Senator Gallivan said, is change some of the laws, fix some of the policies that are in place to remember and always keep in mind and keep the focus on the crime victims and their loved ones. So with that, I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for having us, and I look forward to a conversation.
Oh, thanks, Dean. I'd also like to thank Senate Minority Leader Rob Ort's office, who's represented here today by Julia Bauer. Senate Media Services, who are the people behind the camera. You should know we are streaming live on Facebook, and then the recording of this in its entirety will be available through our website. Is that yes or no, Keith? And Keith, the good-looking guy shaking his head back there, is our chief of staff, heads up our office. So we have Keith Bryan and a number of members of the team from my office that were instrumental in putting this together, so I thank them. You know, it's interesting, for those of you who listen to us thank people, when you put things together, a lot of times we are lucky enough, we walk in and things just work. but we don't know how it gets put together. Well, when you start watching the people who put it together, there's a lot of work that's involved, a lot of coordination. And so we really are grateful for the people that were involved in that. So our format, we have 5 panels, and we're looking to go approximately 20 minutes each with each panel, and then obviously we'll have that time of transition. And each panel will be asked just to share some comments. Some might be prepared, some might just be sharing comments. And then we'll have a dialogue where we'll ask some questions, and hopefully we'll fit all that in with each panel within 20 minutes. Anybody who doesn't testify, if you happen to have some input or thoughts, you're welcome ultimately to submit written testimony. And you can connect with me afterwards or just check with some of the people that we've mentioned from our office that are available. That can let you know how to do that if you have an interest in doing that. So our first panel represents local law enforcement. We have Mike Lefanchek, who is the Deputy Executive Director of the New York State Association of Chiefs of Police, who is a former Chief of Police himself in Baldwinsville, which is a town near Syracuse. Town or city?
Village.
Or a village near Syracuse. And the president of the Erie County Association of Chiefs of Police is Lancaster Police Chief William Gummo, who I am proud to say that years ago, for a very short time, we worked together in the Erie County Sheriff's Office. But we thank both of you gentlemen for being here and are looking forward to what you have to say. So we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. As the senator said, I'm Michael Lefanchek, recently retired as the police chief in the village of Ballsville, where I spent 38 years, last 17 and a half as chief of police, and now I'm the deputy executive director for the New York State Association Chiefs of Police. I want to thank Senator Gallivan and Senator Murray for the opportunity to be here this morning. You know, with all of the recent legislative focus on the rights of the accused and minimizing incarceration time, there seems to have been little to no discussion regarding victim demographics, and that those track those of the perpetrators. As an example, in New York City, doesn't matter if crime is up or down, 92% of shooting victims, 95% of homicide victims, 75% of sexual assault victims, and over 80% of victims for felony assault are either black or Hispanic. And since most perpetrators commit crime in their own geographic location, and a small number of people commit a disproportionate quantity of this crime, we're releasing these individuals into neighborhoods of color to victimize disproportionately poor people of color. According to a 2024 National Crime Victims Survey, half of violent victimizations are not reported to law enforcement. Some of this may be attributed to the belief or assumption that the rights of the victim have been ignored, while the rights of the accused have been amplified. The criminal justice system, as those of us that have worked in it for a long time know, that it can be slow-moving and a confusing one, especially to victims. Crime victims often do not receive timely updates about their cases due to a lack of resources, not for a lack of desire, in many prosecutors' offices and police departments. The New York State Association Chiefs of Police strongly advocates for increased resources for victim and witness services. Crime victims have suffered harm through no fault of their own. They need enhanced efforts to ensure that they do not feel victimized by the very system that's supposed to bring them justice. Investing in crime victims is not simply the compassionate thing to do. It's essential for social stability and public safety as a whole. Chief.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for time here today. I want to thank Senator Gallivan and Senator Murray. Great to be here. As Senator Gallivan said, I did start my career working for the Erie County Sheriff's Office as a jail management deputy under then Sheriff Gallivan. And I've been working for the Lancaster Police Department for nearly 23 years, the last 2.5 as their chief of police. What I'd like to get a little more pointed and discuss what we currently deal with. It's a nationwide problem, but it's something we currently deal with in all local communities. It's a couple different areas where people really aren't maybe remembered as victims. You know, we traditionally see victims and think of victims as those of assault, domestic violence, homicide victims. There's a lot of other categories where people fall victim to crimes. Victims of theft, victims of fraud, identity theft. Those areas a lot of times are forgotten. But we also, what we're really dealing with is a couple other areas that it's happening all over this country, and that's property crimes, people breaking into cars, stealing property, stealing vehicles. That's something that Senator Gallivan and I have talked about in the past, and it's on the uprise, and this isn't slowing down. I think there's things that can be done in the policing end, but also on the state level to make it so that the victims don't have to suffer through this long-term, lose their vehicle, lose their property, and have no recourse. We're seeing time and time again, young individuals stealing vehicles from somebody's driveway, and a lot of times getting arrested, but in a short period of time, they are let out, and oftentimes in the same day that they were originally arrested, going back and stealing another vehicle or other property. The other area that we're frequently, at least in Lancaster, we're dealing with is human and sex trafficking. The people involved with that, though at times they are committing crimes, they're victims. They're not always remembered as being victims. They're a lot of times brought into the environment, not of their choosing. They're coerced or strong-armed into it through grooming or whatever it may be, and they get caught up in, drug activity, sex crime activity, and, we forget they're victims. Though they are committing crimes, they are victims because a lot of times they're there not by their own choosing. They're there because they've kind of been forced into that lifestyle, and that lifestyle then becomes their new normal. I think at the local level, policing needs to constantly be evolving to keep up and match what the criminals are doing. We need to consistently try to do better and make ourselves better, keep training to keep up with what they're doing. But at the state level, the penalties, I think, need to be enforced and need to be upheld for these criminals so that it gives some reprieve, like the senator said, to the victims of these crimes. So they're not always looking behind their back for what's gonna come next. Thank you for your time.
So it's easier to go Mike and Bill instead of these titles, all right?
Fine.
That's okay with you guys? Mike, you talked about resources.
Yes, sir.
That we need more resources. What would those resources be? Like what type of resources?
Well,
And how do they get delivered?
So I think just initially, for them to feel more inclusive is to what's happening and understand where their case is and what's going to happen with the case where they've been the victim of as it relates to the perpetrator of that event. Secondly, some of these individuals have suffered harm, whether it be physical, economic, social, all those types of things that impact them. As the chief mentioned, we've talked, the issue of identity theft and fraud is a huge one facing our population, especially our seniors, and for greater resources for them to understand how to navigate getting their identity back if they've been the victim of financial fraud, resources that are easy to follow for them to seek assistance through the banking institutions, things along those lines. And then it might involve resources such as, greater enhancements to the VINE program, which is the victim identification notification, as you know, being a former sheriff, of individuals that are incarcerated and when they're going to be either released from incarceration or being held on bail. So all those types of things are vital for them to have a feeling of safety and security that I think society is incumbent upon providing all of our citizens, but especially those that have been victimized, as I mentioned earlier, through no fault of their own.
What role, either of you guys, what role does the responding police officer play when it comes to providing victim services? So you get a report of, we'll say a property crime, more common. You get a report of a property attack, crime being stolen, internet crime, whatever it might be. Your police officer responds. They take the report. Obviously, I know that their job is to figure out who did it, ultimately make the arrest, work with the prosecutor, and so on. And I appreciate, Bill, you talking about the enforcing the law type of thing, all the way through the system, making sure that the penalty does take place, right, to serve as a deterrent, among other things. But anyway, going back to the victim, what role does your police officer play in saying, okay, victim, okay, Mrs. Jones, Mr. Smith, whatever it might be, this happened now. Here's what you can do. Or these might be available services. What role does the responding police officer play in that, if any?
I think they really should play a crucial role in that. You know, the victims are not going to deal with the chief of police or a senator. You know, they're going to deal with that responding officer. They're going to deal with the boots on the ground people that are out there answering their calls. And sometimes where policing fails is we fail to recognize what all the resources that are available to point victims to. And there's a ton of them that are out there, as we all probably know. We just don't always know what the opportunities are that are available for some of these victims and the means to point them to the right direction. But I think the first responding officer's role is crucial in getting that first contact and providing the first bit of information to a victim.
It goes back to making that victim who's been, reporting a crime to the police, because no one ever calls the state police or the town or village or city police or sheriff's office because they're having a good day. We get called when something bad has happened. That's when those phone calls occur. So, as the chief mentioned, it's incumbent upon our members on the front lines to provide strong, empathetic customer service to those individuals and to provide them a feeling that something will be done. I know in my organization, when a case was assigned for follow-up, our officers were responsible for maintaining contact with the victim. And then even if the case was not ultimately solved, we sent those individuals a letter to let them know that we did thoroughly investigate the matter, that the matter is closed, but that we would reopen the investigation pending new information. So at least they felt that the police department had taken their incident seriously and it acted accordingly.
I'll come back, but Senator Murray?
I kind of want to piggyback on the reporting aspect of it and the impact. So are you seeing that over the past few years, listen, you see the headlines, you see it in the city where, this one is arrested for the 70th time or something. I remember one where they showed the video of the guy he was arrested again, released again, and on his way out the door turned to the judge and said, "I can't believe you're letting me go," and went out and committed more crimes. But does this have an impact on the victims actually reporting? Are you seeing them saying, you know what, what's the point? What's the point? We're not going to get justice. They're just going to let them back out again. Is that having an impact?
Without a doubt. When you see statistics like that where half of those types of incidents are not reported, I think you can draw a direct correlation back to the fact that there's a general ambivalence and a feeling that they're not going to get justice and that, quote unquote, nothing will be done. I remember reading the very incident you're talking about in the New York Post about that. So, and I remember seeing those headlines. So when people see those things over and over again, that belief is going to sink in more, without a doubt.
And I think that plays too when we hear statistics. It's like, don't believe your eyes, believe the statistics I'm going to give you. And we hear statistics of, no, crime is down and this, that, the other. But that's not what I'm hearing, and that's not what I'm seeing. So I just want to know if that has an impact on those statistics. When they're saying it's down, could part of that be because they're just not being reported now?
Well, you know, as I mentioned earlier, it doesn't matter whether crime is up or crime is down. The same people are often being victimized in the same neighborhoods. And oftentimes, those are communities of color. And I think that has to be acknowledged and addressed as well, that individuals who are being released back into the community to victimize more individuals, especially of a different, in a lower socioeconomic class, that maybe it's a poor neighborhood, things along those lines. You know, I think we as a society have a responsibility to ensure that everyone can be safe in their homes and everyone should be safe in their neighborhoods. And that's not just the responsibility of the agency that's responsible for policing there, but it's responsibility of all of us.
Do police officers get enough training to deal with victims properly, in your view?
I don't think we could ever get enough training. There's always more training because new tactics, new techniques, new thoughts, they're always evolving. And though we try to keep up with it, you know, every agency is dealing now with having a difficult time staffing. So when you have lesser staff, how do you then dedicate more time to training when you don't have, you know, our job is to make sure that the roads are safe and that our communities are flooded with our people to make sure that, you know, we are being a crime deterrent and we are being a voice for the victims. We don't have enough people. It's hard to continue to put more training on their laps when they are already inundated with work. We always can do more training and we always can be better at what we're doing. You know, our goals are to be the best available resources for the people in our communities. But to answer your question, I think there's always a way we can do more to ensure that the victims, whether it's in our community, our county, our state, we need to know more of what the resources that are available.
All right, so if you get down right to the nuts and bolts of it, it's hard, obviously, for a statewide training program to provide training on dealing with victims and the types of services available that are applicable in every corner of the state, right? So it becomes more of a local thing. Mm-hmm. What would you think would be the best way that the local police officer, whether it's in Baldwinsville or Messina or Lancaster, can get sufficient information to know what victim services are available in their service area?
I think if it starts at the state level and it kind of melts down into the county level, and then the counties filter that out through the localities, through, you know, group organizations such as, you know, the chiefs associations that are in, you know, each county or each district. You know, the state does provide some great opportunities, some great training. But again, like you said, it kind of gets localized as to what the problems are at different parts of the state. So it really kind of, I think, is incumbent upon all agencies to continue to work together to make sure that for their area, Western New York being, you know, my area, Erie County, we have the best opportunity to know what the resources are available in our area or even throughout the state for certain levels of crimes.
You know, when we talk about the purpose of policing, it's to protect the vulnerable from harm. That's the ultimate goal of individuals that get into our profession. And anything we can do to assist in protecting our vulnerable, which, you know, we're talking about people that have already been victimized. So clearly they're vulnerable. So I think anyone who's working for our organizations is going to want to provide them with the most robust amount of information as possible. And if there can be more information and flow to those local police organizations where the rubber meets the road, as the chief mentioned, that's critical to that process of protecting our vulnerable.
Is there something available right now, like at least a website, something to at least guide the victim where you can say, okay, look, check this site or check this to find some resources? Obviously, we need to do better, but is there something right now?
Oh, sure. There's the New York State Crime Victims Compensation Board and things along those lines, and every accredited or every agency in the state's required in some sort of public venue, public lobby, to have posters and things. But most of our folks aren't walking into local police departments to report crimes. They're calling 911, and as the chief mentioned before, you know, the primary mission of a police department is then to answer calls for service and provide that level of safety and security and have those officers and staff visible. So, you know, for 98, 99% of our reports and in public contact, we're responding to them. They're not coming to us.
I don't know if this is the correct, or maybe another panel might be, but I just want to put this out. In the beginning, I had mentioned rehabilitation. You had mentioned that property crime is a big thing. Well, we know that a lot of times it's someone that's been, you know, maybe a sports injury or something, and got pain pills and got hooked, and all of a sudden now they're trying to get more, so they're stealing and trying to raise money to get more, and it's a cycle. They need as much help too. And I've heard from my local sheriff that bail reform was a huge step backwards in that aspect, because he said, look, if we're arresting them for breaking into cars or breaking into homes and stealing to get drug money, if we arrest them and then we turn them loose, they're not going to get help. But if I can hold them, I can get them help. And so he thought that bail reform was a huge step backwards in that aspect. So when we're talking about even giving some help to the victim, I mean to the criminals, getting them some rehabilitation services or something, I think we've damaged that as well with bail reform. What are your thoughts on that?
From our perspective, from New York State Association of Chiefs of Police, you know, we're a proponent of the HALT Act, which would allow judges to consider certainly the dangerousness level of a defendant when they're determining that individual's release status. I think that would go a long way. They're elected officials, and they should be provided that leeway in making a determination. They're elected by local people, and they know what's best for their community, and allowing those judges to then make that determination as to what someone should or shouldn't be allowed to do as far as release or not goes. I think that would be a very sensible and easy step towards working to correct some of the things that you mentioned yourself, Senator.
I believe that the Bail Reform Act has gone a bit too far in making sure that the people out there committing the crimes, they don't see that opportunity to serve any meaningful time or any penalties. And I think it does, you know, even though they may be incarcerated, there are still services available while they're incarcerated to get them some help, to keep them, you know, on track. I've seen it, you know, working in the jail years ago, where it was a revolving door with certain people. They'd be in and out, in and out, in and out, and there were services available that they truly could have taken advantage of and needed, but we're continuously being, you know, let out on for reasons, you know, that I can't explain. And I think, you know, having judges have the opportunity to hold people accountable and incarcerate them, and then at some points mandate some services for them so that they can start to get some help, maybe that would see a huge reduction in certain types of crimes.
I was going to offer the opportunity to add anything else. That was a strong finish, though. But do you have, is there anything else before we conclude with you guys? I mean, anything else that you wanted to bring forward?
I just, you know, I appreciate your time being here, having us here. I think the state as a whole, you know, needs to do better when it comes down to considering the victims as victims and not the people who are committing the crimes as the victims here.
Right. Thank you both. Or
Thank you.
Did you have something to add, Mike?
I was just going to say, appreciate the opportunity as well to be here, and it's only through conversations and open dialogue such as this that progress can be made in moving forward. So thank you very much.
Yeah, and feel free, if you think of something later on, feel free to reach out.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you
gentlemen.
both.
Thank you.
Our next panel is Erie County, a couple of representatives from the Erie County Sheriff's Office, who, of course, I was proud to work with when I was sheriff, and they've both assumed leadership positions and I think are doing a wonderful job, and I'm grateful for their service to the community. But we have with us Chief Tim Carney and Captain Warren Lewick. Thank you guys for being here. I'm not sure if that's on. Let's see.
Check.
There you go.
Got
You
it. Not good with my cell phone either.
Go right ahead.
Okay, so I guess so Tim Carney, Erie County Sheriff's Office, Chief of Police Services. I've been in my role in this capacity for the last 4 years. I've in law enforcement for 26 years now. I spent some time at the Buffalo Municipal Housing Authority, Department of Public Safety. I was an Amherst cop for about 3 years. Then in my time at the Sheriff's Office, I investigated narcotics-related crimes for about 15 years. I was a member of the U.S. Marshals Violent Felony Warrant Squad, and a couple other assignments over the years.
Captain Warren Lewick, thank you for the opportunity.
I don't think yours is on. It has a delayed reaction.
That I know? Okay.
There you go.
There you go.
Thank you. Captain Warren Lewick, Erie County Sheriff's. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I've been in law enforcement for 27 years now. Senator Gallivan actually hired me when I was at the Sheriff's Office. And I've been in various roles from deputy professional standards to the night watch commander on the night shift to now captain of communications.
Okay, so I would start with like maybe a brief statement and then maybe a quick story to kind of put this all into perspective. So since about 2017, I would argue that crime victims in New York State have been under attack. 2017 was the passing of Raise the Age, which raised the age of criminal liability from 16 in some instances, 17 in other instances, to 18. 2019, we had discovery reform, which mandated that we, law enforcement officers, investigators, the district attorney's office, turn over every single piece of paperwork involved with an investigation in a period of time that, quite frankly, isn't reasonable. A failure to do so can lead to the dismissal of charges. And then I'd say in 2019, 2020, we had bail reform. The idea of bail reform started in 2019. It took effect January 1st of 2020. It's been previously discussed. It's been absolutely horrible for crime victims. And then in 2020, we had the repeal of 50A, which made law enforcement officers, personnel, and disciplinary records readily available and open to the public. When you take a look at all four of these things, what it did was it made it more difficult for law enforcement officers to do their jobs, therefore making it harder for us to protect victims, which is unfortunate. I'll go to just last week. I got a call from a good friend of mine. He owns a small business with his wife and his mother-in-law in South Buffalo. Mother-in-law lives in the West Seneca Orchard Park area, had her car started like we all do because it's cold out, inside her attached garage. She goes inside to finish getting ready to leave to go operate her small business for the day, and she comes out, her car's gone. So I get a call from a friend of mine, hey, my mother-in-law just got her car stolen. Anything you guys could do to help us out? Appreciate it. So we take a bunch of investigative steps, do our best to locate this vehicle. We come across it the following day in the city of Buffalo. We're able to get our helicopter up. A Buffalo police car gets behind the stolen car, attempts to stop it. They don't stop, of course. Chase goes on with the helicopter for about 45 minutes. You know, based on the repeal of 50A and some bail reform stuff and raise the age, the mentality of a lot of law enforcement officers is, why are we gonna put ourselves at risk and be involved in a high-speed pursuit with this vehicle where it's gonna cause potential problems for us with the Attorney General's office. It's gonna open us up to liability. And at the same time, when we catch the people in the stolen car, they're gonna get a ticket. Well, that's exactly what happened. So 45 minutes goes on, 3 people in the car, all 17 years old, who are now no longer criminally responsible as adults, driving on the wrong side of the road, involved in a T-bone car accident, up on sidewalks, eventually bail out of the car, leave the car rolling, rolls down the street, and plows into a fire hydrant. Car's absolutely destroyed. They ripped out the infotainment system because they thought there was a GPS in there and that they could be tracked. Left McDonald's in the glove box, totally destroyed the car. 3 17-year-olds in custody. All 3 17-year-olds who have been involved in incidents like this over the last couple years, have been a huge problem in the city of Buffalo, are released on tickets with an appearance time and date a couple weeks down the road in family court, released on tickets before the victim even gets their car back. And then when they do get their car back, the car is totally destroyed to the point where they have to turn it back into the dealership, and it costs them a new down payment. So that's just one, and that's not even a violent crime, that's a property crime, like we discussed. And that's just one incident of something that goes on hundreds of times a month in Western New York, where the people involved in committing the crimes are being given more consideration than those who are victims of crimes. And I think it's a huge problem in Erie County and Western New York and New York State in general. And I'm sure it also leads to the underreporting of crimes, as was previously discussed. Imagine you're haven't called 911 your entire life, which is a lot of people we run into in the 600 square miles that we cover. People don't call 911 every day, and when they do, they're having a bad day. And sometimes it's the worst day they've had in a long time or potentially their entire life. And we show up and we say we take somebody into custody for stealing something out of their car, and next thing you know, they watch us give them a ticket. So the mentality is like, why am I even calling? So I'm sure this is leading to an underreporting of crime. I think another consequence of bail reform is, so e-felony or lower, bail reform mandates that we issue an appearance ticket. So you have all these people who are not being held until they're arraigned. They're being given tickets like a speeding ticket. And we have a 25% increase in the amount of people that don't show up for court. So bench warrants are up 25%, which is a huge problem. And we have been given 0 resources to correct that. That's kind of where I'm at with this whole thing, and that was just kind of one brief story to kind of put this all in perspective. It's a real victim. This woman's never called 911 in her life. She owns a small business. The checkbook for her business was in the car. It's all gone, right? So imagine being a small business that just barely manages to get by day to day, and now you have to deal with someone's going to write a bad check, or someone's going to write a fake check or a fraudulent check, and imagine trying to clean that mess up and run your business. So it's just New York State's kind of been unbelievable with,
Okay, let me ask though, so how do you fix that?
so,
So, well, before you do, so we're here to talk about crime victims, but I'm taking your premise is that we better serve them. It's hard to serve them with the hand you're dealt right now. And you better serve them with the changes in the hand you're dealt. But what is the change that you'd recommend?
so the change is bail reform from 2020 was so bad, there's been 3 amendments to it. I think it needs further amendments. Like one of the previous panelists mentioned, we need judges to be able to consider dangerousness, which they cannot right now. They can consider a flight risk and set bail and hold somebody, but they can't consider a dangerousness standard. So could you imagine, you're a judge, you have a defendant in you, you take a look at their criminal history and you see, oh, they did 10 years in prison for manslaughter and are out. And now they're before me again, accused of committing another crime, and I can't take that into consideration at all when I make a determination as to whether or not they should be held. You know, obviously this is a dangerous person, right? And they haven't learned from their previous incarceration. That person doesn't belong out on the street because he's just going to create more victims. So I think something like that should change. Additionally, with the 25% increase in the bench warrants, I think we need funding from the state for bodies. You know, when's the last time you heard somebody say, wow, we really have too many cops? It's never happened. Some nights, I would say most nights at the Erie County Sheriff's Office, we're staffed with 11 deputies covering 600 square miles and half the population of Erie County. How is that fair to victims, right? How is that fair to community members who are being victimized because we can't be everywhere all at the same time? We're too far spread out. So we need resources to hire more people. We need funds to hire more people. The Erie County Sheriff's Office is still not fully staffed to the number of police services deputies we were staffed at prior to the red-green budget. We're still not back. And the population of Erie County has gone up. It hasn't gone up exponentially, but it has increased. So we're working with less bodies, less policemen than we were back in 2003 before the red-green budget.
So how do you staff up? Is all of this affecting, I mean, listen, I've never seen our society to this point where the victims are apparently the good guys and law enforcement's the bad guys. Well, like we're vilifying police, law enforcement that's got to have an effect on recruitment, but what else can we do to fix and help you to recruit?
Yeah, I think some further amendments to the bail reform law would assist. We're hiring right now, and I participate in the hiring process every 6 months when we're looking for new recruits to send through the academy to replace our retirements, which, by the way, are happening at record numbers. So now we have the youngest agency amongst our deputies and our supervisors that I've ever seen in my last 26 years. So we have younger supervisors supervising younger deputies over 600 square miles, and we're minimally staffed. It's a recipe for disaster, and quite frankly, being staffed at those levels makes it so we don't have time for victims.
Is Tier 6 having an impact too on hiring?
It does. Part of Tier 6 is that your retirement is at 50% of what your final average salary is. It doesn't include overtime. It doesn't include court time. So some people, their mentality is, why would I work overtime if it's not going to help my pension, right? It's not going to help me out in the long run. I don't know that, law enforcement officers are held to a higher standard, so should that be the mentality? Probably not. But to sit up here and say that that doesn't go through people's minds, I'd be lying to you.
Chief, you just mentioned something I was going to try to get to, but your words were that we don't have time for victims. Further explain that, would you?
So we're on a call for a stolen car, and let me hurry up and get your information because there's a violent domestic hanging a town over, and we're minimally staffed. We only have 11 people working tonight. We can't pull a body from another district to handle that car because there are no other bodies. So Imagine being the first time you ever called 911, and I show up at your house, and I'm short with you and don't spend any time with you because there's 4 calls waiting. I don't have time. Sometimes all it takes is an extra 5 minutes to be kind to somebody and to make them know that you care and you're going to do the best you can. But being staffed like this, we just don't have time to.
So your point on the laws, your point on the resources, especially in terms of like personnel, obviously, are very well made. But let's go back to if you were staffed properly. Give me 2 things, if you could. How do the responding deputies deal with victims? And does that match how you would like to deal with victims?
Yes, I think it does. So if we're more properly staffed, we have deputies who are on 911 calls for service able to spend more time with the victims and not have to rush off to another call because they have a partner or partners working in a closer proximity to them that can handle the other calls. So yeah, that lines up with what our mission is, right? To investigate crimes and to represent those who are victimized. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what a cop does, right? You were assaulted, you had something stolen from you. I'm going to show up, I'm going to do a report, and I'm going to figure out what happened, and I'm going to do my best to hold the offender accountable. We're supposed to be representing victims, and it's gotten so far away from that. It's kind of sad.
Because of the combination of things. The
That's
laws that you mentioned and your
Staff.
lack of human resources.
Correct.
By the way, for the record, in case anyone didn't know, going back to the giving judges discretion on bail, New York is the only state in the nation that does not allow judges discretion. All 49 other states, judges have that power. So, I mean, it seems to be working elsewhere. I don't know why we're not there. But I had brought up, when the victims hear about the revolving door and them getting let out and everything, does that affect them reporting? But I'd like to hear, how does that affect morale? And I go back to the hiring and recruiting and the retention of officers. What is morale like when you see these laws being passed, whether it's raise the age, which, by the way, we nicknamed that the Gang Recruitment Act,
Right.
because that's what's happening. But how does that affect the morale on the force, and does it lead to these pending problems we're hearing about?
It does. For me to sit up here and say that that's not the case wouldn't be truthful. It leads to the mentality of what you watch a car go by with. They're doing 3 things wrong, right? They have a headlight out and they're speeding and they didn't use their turn signal. Cops make split-second decisions every day. So they're making a decision as that car passes. Do I want to stop it? Do I not want to stop it? I would guarantee you that the number of cops that say I'm not going to stop it because it's a waste of my time has gone up exponentially since bail reform and raise the age and the repeal of 50A. It's all interrelated. You would think, how does, lack of staffing and bail reform and the repeal of 50A, what does any of that have to do with victims? Well, it's correlated because that's how police interact with the victims. That all relates to how police interact with the victims.
One other, do you have anyone on staff right now specifically dedicated to communicating with victims?
So yes, I know in the next panel, and I don't want to steal his a part of his spiel, Brian Moore is recently retired from the Erie County Sheriff's Office. He headed up for a long time, maybe 20 years, our domestic violence unit. And what that unit is, they are domestic violence advocates. It's 4 advocates and a supervisor, who Brian was, that deal strictly with victims of domestic violence. So they come in the morning, they take a look at all the domestic incidents and all the domestic incidents reports from the day and the night before, and they reach out to the victims of those reports and offer them up, if they want them, services with counseling, a place to stay, job opportunities, or anything else a domestic violence advocate or a domestic violence victim could use. I believe the Erie County Sheriff's Office was the first law enforcement agency in Erie County to create those positions, and I believe it may have happened under then Sheriff Gallivan.
Good memory.
But outside of DV, is there any, and I'm glad you're doing that, but outside of the DV incidents, is there any communication or specific person for this?
Right, and not to be smart with you,
No,
but
sure,
like,
sure.
do we have a stolen car crime victims
Right,
advocate?
right.
We don't. No, so I know at the Erie County District Attorney's Office, for all the homicides that come in, I know the DA's office has crime victim advocates. But as far as us, no. We have one therapy dog that is, quite frankly, overused. Had instances with, some murder-suicides in some schools where the murder-suicide wasn't in the school, but, the parents involved, kids go to a specific school, and the kids unfortunately have to find out. This is just one instance where the kids have to find out that they lost both their parents, right? So it's great to have, some people laugh, but it's great to have a therapy dog present. It just takes the whole, it just lowers the level on everything, and it just makes for a much easier job in advising these kids that they lost both their parents. And we also have which is somewhat new, is we have a detective assigned to the Strive grant, which is a detective that investigates only intimate partner domestic violence. He's assigned to that, and his caseload is such that he's allowed to spend more time with victims.
And I apologize, I think I wasn't, you're right, to your point that, no, we can't have a stolen car unit and all. What I meant more was a person to just communicate with them. Because one thing I've heard from the victims is they want information, like where do we stand? Where's our case stand? Where does this stand? Is there anyone just to provide updates on that to the victims?
Right, I guess to simplify it, if you are the victim of a misdemeanor crime that is not referred to the Detective Bureau, the answer is no. If you are the victim of a crime that does get referred to the Detective Bureau, my answer would be yes, because we have those detectives that are constantly following up with victims.
Could you, I don't know if you're able to put that in terms of percentages. So how many of the crimes are not, the crimes that deputies are responding to are not domestic violence or not felonies?
If I had to, and this is just a guess, sir, if I had to guess, I'd say probably 40% of the crimes we deal with are not felonies and not domestic violence. 40% of the calls we do handle are domestic violence and not felonies. The other 60% would fall into either a felony or.
So we're leaving, essentially then, approximately, if these numbers are accurate, but I think you get the point.
Yeah.
You have 40% of victims just kind of hanging out there with no direction, or nobody to stand by their side and give them direction how to navigate the criminal justice system and how to, whether it's recovering property or whatever it might be.
Correct, and not to, keep beating the drum, but that goes back to staffing.
Understood. But the reason I ask is because the prior panel did testify that, and I neglected to ask the question, but the bulk of the things that they're responding to are the non-felonies in the community.
Correct, and especially I think that's even more accurate amongst a sheriff's office, where their responsibility is to be the police in our rural community.
Yeah, and I'm not saying I'm not disparaging it. I'm trying to point out that for people who live in their communities, they want to go to their home and have their house there without broken into. They want to walk to the car. They want their kid's bike to be on the front lawn where they left it, among other things. And we've got a large number of people who are victimized that are not, they're victimized, and we're failing them just simply by not keeping them and their community safe. But once that happens, we're not there to guide them and help them through a process where they might be helped. That was really the point I was trying to draw.
Yeah, and just to reinforce that, I would say a lot of the people at the sheriff's office that we deal with that live in some of these more rural areas, that don't necessarily have a ton of interaction with the police still in many instances think it's okay to leave their windows unlocked, it's okay to leave your doors unlocked, it's okay to leave your keys in the car, which just leads to further victimization.
Before we finish up, is there anything else that you want to bring up, or any specific recommendations that you might have not made?
I took some notes, just kind of thinking about coming here today, and the one thing that kind of stands out to me is, you know, Erie County has a Stop DWI program, and what their mission is to track those that were arrested for DWI. In many instances, they're misdemeanors. In some instances, they're felonies if they're repeat offenders. And the goal, their mission, is to make sure that these cases just aren't getting swept under the rug. And, you know, they want to see that the justice system follows through, because DWI is such a big problem. But it kind of struck me that, like, we don't have a stop homicide, you know, arm that tracks homicides or robberies, or call it a, you know, stop violent crime. Where's the group that tracks these cases down? You know, how is a DWI more important to track than a homicide or a burglary or a robbery or a violent assault? So I guess I'll leave you with that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next panel represents the Seneca Nation of Indians. Brian Moore is the nation's law enforcement liaison, and he's coming off a long career in the sheriff's office. It's the individual Chief Kearney made reference to in dealing with victims for many, many years. And the executive director of Seneca Nation Victim Services, Sharon Francis. And we welcome you both and thank you for being here. The floor is yours.
Okay, good afternoon. I guess it's afternoon. Good afternoon. My name is Brian Moore. Recently retired from the Erie County Sheriff's Office, up to 25 years in working in that area with victims of crime within the Sheriff's Office. During that time, I've overseen the domestic violence unit, which we were looking at dealing with victims that were of domestic violence crimes, sexual assaults, elder abuse crimes against our elders, things all of that. Because with the New York State laws changing, that's where the elder abuse fall under domestic violence under that frame. So that we're starting to look at that area. With that, we've had a staff, as the sheriff did, or the chief did explain. We had a domestic violence unit staff that overlooked over our 16 towns and villages within the sheriff department, including the Seneca Nation territory. So they followed up with every victim there that would come in on a domestic violence report or a sexual assault or elder abuse case for follow-up. And with them follow-ups, a lot of these went right from the first contact with the officer. From there, it went right to the victim, to the domestic violence unit, and working right with the victim. So they would follow that victim all the way through, from the state of their first contact that they had with a deputy, right to going to court, and then also helping them to follow up with services that they would need for that victim or their family. That's following that all the way down, getting them through that process, and then monitoring that case. Sometimes after the cases were closed, there may be follow-up again with that same victim after the case was closed. We, like as the chief said, it's a first domestic violence unit to look at victims in that way, using advocates that are right within the sheriff department's jurisdiction. We have access of a database that was developed at the sheriff's office. So if a victim had called in one time, 5 times. We only heard from them 1 year, and then next year, that person came up again. It was put into a database. So when it came back up again for that victim, then they needed the services from the sheriff's office. It would go back to that advocate that handled that original case. So they're not retelling their story over again and not feeling comfortable of that situation. As the chief said, so many different variations of that in dealing with victims there in that area. So I think that's a key piece there is accountability. And I think that part of the accountability is there's not having that victim retell their story over and over again. And I think that's a key right there. Collaboration is a must, I think, with police agencies and the service providers out there. The police agencies, have to know the service providers out there. It should be that collaboration in which we've had at the sheriff's office where we would be involved with different domestic violence and sexual assault organizations there, having that input, that collaboration back and forth with those victims. So again, any victim, even though if they weren't even in a jurisdiction of the sheriff's office, they were helped out in any way that they could be in any kind of variation. So again, if it's a walk-in or if it's a report that comes in, then victims were looked at. So, and again, Senator Gallivan, that did happen on your watch, and I was hired 25 years ago under your administration during that time. And so I think that is continued to grow. I've worked with 3 different sheriffs during that time, and I think each time that has gotten stronger with the domestic violence unit. But again, as the chief did say, that funding that has hurt our domestic violence unit because of lack of funding there, and the different added responsibilities that unit would take on. Give grant helped tremendously when that funding come in there, but that's just starting to break, just starting to break into it there. It's not, we haven't really got a good grasp of that yet, but that has helped. But I think continuing funding sources are key right there to that. Presently, I'm, as retired from the sheriff's office, I'm working with the Seneca Nation as their Seneca Nation law enforcement liaison. So that is going to be working with all the different agencies, law enforcement agencies within our counties, and that kind of networking and what we can do to strengthen and look at safety within our communities that impact all of our people. So right now, I guess that I think I'd looked at this as some of the things that crime victim advocacies for tribal nations in New York State. I really appreciate the changes of New York State Crime Victims has done, looking at betterment of that programs and that outreach, and especially looking at the outreach of just not our urban, suburban, but the rural areas. A lot of times that does get left out, the people in our rural areas. I think they have the need to have that kind of networking there, and these kind of community town hall meetings like you have in the past where you've got out to them, where they can come and hear their voice out in a town hall and bring that data all back and seeing where we go from there. I think that's a key part there. During my career, I've worked with a lot of the rural areas there, kind of know their needs and concerns and how they feel. Some things that we wanted to do, look at, and I think possibly with this, is maybe educating some of them areas in the rural areas, have them educational meetings for them, and letting them know their resources that they have. But that's the key right there. Sure, they have their law enforcement, but I think they need to know their resources in each of those areas.
Can I ask you, do you think that that's something that's needed for law enforcement agencies as well? That you've got, that victim services organizations are making all the law enforcement agencies that serve in their area aware of what they do and their availability and the services they can provide?
Well, I think
or is it sufficient now?
Yes, Senator, I think that needs to be revisited and looked at. Over the years, they've had put out some training material out there, showing, for law enforcement that would show all of the advocates in their area, where they would be looking at the key areas to working with victims. And that there was that collaboration with meetings with law enforcement, service providers, hand in hand. I think that, look like a multidisciplinary team of that, where you had law enforcement, advocates working together, social workers, things of that sort, where you had that, collaboration.
Just jump, Sharon, are you able to talk about, is the Seneca Nation Victim Services, is it confined to domestic violence, or are you serving other types of victims of other crimes?
We service all types of victims of crimes, not just domestic violence, sexual assault. We also do elder abuse.
Oh, I don't think your microphone is on. I'm not sure if it's on.
Can you hear me now? Is that better?
Yes, I do. It wasn't close enough. There we go.
Yes, we service a variety of crimes, and any victim that comes in, regardless if it's sexual assault or if it's simple assault, we provide all services, anybody that's needing that.
Can you take us through it? So let's just say I'm a victim of a sexual assault. So I need help. What do you do?
I meet them where they're at. So if they're ready to talk, we'll help them, and just comforting them at that moment and seeing what they need, and we'll continue on the path and provide them options and information. We'll actually do some grounding work with them at first, making sure they're in a good state to talk and be comfortable with us, and guide them along the way and walk with them essentially the whole pathway. So it depends on the person coming in, but we'll be helpful, essentially seeing what they wanted to do. If they wanted to go file a police report, we'll take them there. We'll also, invite other family members if they're interested in talking to another family member or a resource. So we'll just support them at that moment and continue on with them.
What does somebody have to do to qualify for your services? Is it being a member of the nation, or is it something that might happen on your territory, on the various lands
Yes.
that you have operations on?
Yeah, so we offer our priority services are for our Seneca Nation members that are on territory, and then those that all live off territory, will provide them services as well. Anybody that's
No matter where they might be victims?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And then anybody reaching into our office, will assist them as best we can. If they're not a member of our nation, we'll still assist and see how we can help.
So, between the two of you, do you think that victim services, do they need to be specialized by type? A victim of domestic violence, a victim of a property crime, a victim of a sexual assault? Do they need to be specialized, or provide, or?
Yeah, some of them.
Or is it just a broad service?
Yeah, some advocates will break that down. There's some agencies where they'll have, separate, sexual assault and domestic violence. But a lot of times, our advocates, and what we had looked at is they're dealing with domestic violence. It could be sexual assault, so they're trained in all those areas, and working with the victim. So I think a lot of times they are specialized in their areas. You're seeing more and more crime victims advocates that have more of a specialty. We're looking they're trained in sexual assault, they're trained in domestic violence, and now recently looking at crimes against our elders. In the county, and with this collaboration, we would work with a lot of the different agencies, the county agencies or state agencies, to look at those resources for them.
I wanted to talk about the Okay, so orders of protection. One of the things I'm hearing, first, do your advocates help with getting orders of protection? But then I hear from some victims, like, do they really help? I've heard the term, it's just a piece of paper. Does it help, or what could we do, or what could be done to make them more effective?
Orders of protection, that's exactly the statement we hear. Do they really help? And often, sometimes it depends on the person. I would say some people feel protected with it. Yes, often I hear it is just a piece of paper. And I don't think they can it can protect me in that moment. So what does that look like? It depends on this person and the situation, very person dependent. I think that within the Seneca Nation, we have a couple different options for orders of protection as well. We utilize the resources that we have, and I think that it really depends on the situation and the person, how they're comfortable, and then further extending it, what are my resources for that?
I was
Is
gonna
really
get
what's
to-
coming to, is like, am I safe with this order of protection at the shelter? Am I safe with my order of protection at home? Am I safe with this order of protection at work? So I think it really depends on, where they're at and what the resources look like for that person.
So I've heard cases, and I don't know if it's from orders of protection or whether it's parole, and that's another issue, but for example, ankle bracelets, monitors, GPS trackers, things like this. And what I've heard is they'll put that in place, but yet it's never monitored. There's nobody looking at it.
Right.
So they could violate it, and you wouldn't know, till the weekend's over or something, or 3 or 4 days down the road. They're not actively. Would it help if we require that if they're using that type of tool, that it be required that it be monitored? That's A. And B, what happens when they violate? Are there penalties? Are they strong enough to deter them from violating it? The orders of protection, in your opinion?
In my opinion, I think that's an option that many of our participants would be interested in, knowing that somebody's looking at those ankle bracelets and that a little bit more safety. I have an order of protection, and then they have an ankle bracelet. I feel a little bit better. Yes. And then this could happen if they violate it. So yes, I think that they would feel more comfortable and feel a little bit more safe at the same time. But there is not always, there's other opportunities where they're not, feeling safe at the same time. So I think it varies too, but I think if the option is available, I think it would be helpful.
What happens now if they're violated?
I don't think much happens right now.
Afraid of, okay.
I wanted to read can I read for you guys?
Go right ahead.
Yeah. So now we scan out Sharon Francis with the Seneca Nation. We just created, we have been having victim services for a while now because of a grant fund that we received, and we will implement that in our nation and for our services for our community members. We really wanted to support them, and this opportunity for this award came through, and we were able to continue on for a couple of years now, and it's been helpful. And we utilize the laws that come from New York State to help with that as well. Then there's some federal laws too that support it. So our services have been developed since we received funding, but just wanted to speak about the legislation that we have too and provide that. So I wrote this up. Now wait for the opportunity to provide testimony on behalf of the Seneca Nation. Our community includes many vulnerable individuals and families who rely on victim services for safety, healing, and stability. We appreciate the recent efforts by New York State to strengthen victim protections and expand access to critical supports. These changes have potential to improve outcomes for Indigenous victims, but their success depends on the thoughtful implementation and meaningful recognition of the unique needs within our nation. Recent legislation updates have brought important improvements, expanded eligibility for compensation, increased financial relief, and new reporting pathways, especially the ability to access compensation without filing a police report, are significant steps forward. These changes is particularly meaningful for Seneca members who may feel unsafe or uncomfortable engaging in law enforcement due to historical trauma, cultural differences, and personal circumstances. However, the impact is not yet consistent. Many victims still face challenges navigating documentation requirements, understanding the process, and reconciling differences between state and tribal systems. With clear communication and culture-informed implementation, the benefits for these reforms do not fully reach those who need them the most. Victims within the Seneca Nation often describe the systems as overwhelming. While many appreciate the removal of the mandatory police report requirement, they still continue to struggle with unclear instructions, repeated requests for information, and emotional burden of retelling their story multiple times. Advocates working within the nation observe that victims feel more supported when they can work with trusted community-based providers who understand both tribal and state processes. This highlights the importance of culturally competent services, and stronger collaboration between New York State and the agencies and tribal governments. To ensure the recent legislation truly supports Indigenous victims, the Seneca Nation recommends the following improvements: streamline documentation to reduce repetitive requests, strengthening coordination between New York State and tribal governments, improving communication, including clear timelines and status updates, expand culture, competency training, ensure trauma-informed practices across all agencies, increase outreach so victims understand their rights and available resources. These improvements would help victims feel safer, more informed, and more supported throughout the process. To fully implement these reforms and meet the needs of victims within the Seneca Nation, additional resources are essential: sustaining funding for tribal victim services and advocacy, safe housing options and reliable transportation for victims, technology upgrades to support applications and submissions and communication, culturally grounded healing and wellness services, adequate staffing to prevent burnout and ensure timely support. In closing, the Seneca Nation remains committed to advocating for the safety and dignity and the well-being of our people. We appreciate the opportunity to share our perspective, and we'll continue working to ensure that victims and our community receive the support and respect they deserve. Now, for your time and consideration.
Can we get a copy of that?
Yes.
I can't remember, I can't repeat all the recommendations.
Oh,
but
yes.
I
I can
but I
give you
like
a-
the fact that you made them. So
Yes.
can we have a copy of
Sure,
it?
yes, you can, yes.
Did you want to add any? Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna, I think that for victims, there's sometimes, there's a process after victimization has happened, and that process is improving. It's just the timeliness that needs to improve as well. The funding has increased a little bit, but we still need support that way, along the way. And we talk about order protection, they could be for years, but you still need that support throughout the whole time. And I think that if there's consideration for funding, it would be helpful for, across the board for victims.
If a victim comes to you, if they're aware of you, they come to you, are you serving victims of all offenses?
All
Like, no matter
offenses.
how serious or?
Yes, that's correct.
I say minor, but minor in the eyes of the law. I don't think it's minor when somebody's victimized, but, so there's no differentiation if somebody comes to you for help, say
Right.
with a petty offense versus a violent felony.
That's correct. We had to piecemeal our victim services together from all our funding awards. So if you talk about that, we are trying to be well-versed in all victims and services and be able to help, because there's more than one. It's multifaceted sometimes. It's not just sexual assault. It could be financial as well, or identity, because there's all these things coming in at once. So we need to be able to help them at the same time. But yes, we do.
All victims from, juveniles right up to the senior citizens. So everything in her program is really looked at into detail.
As well. Brian, did you have anything else to add?
One thing I'd like to add is out to other advocates and things like, know the community that you're serving. And I think that's very important. And I know that we've done that with the law enforcement over the years on both territories of Seneca Nations, for the law enforcement to know that community, come to other community functions, know that community other than that call that comes in, at midnight, for police agencies. And I think that we've opened that door like that in the past with the Erie County Sheriff's Office in Cattaraugus County. But I think that that's the key right there for other service providers. If you're servicing or working with a tribal community or territory, that you have that idea, know the people that you service there. That goes a long ways when you're reaching out as an advocate and working for that people.
But it would be applicable in any community, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, good. All right, thank you both.
Thank you.
And how are we going to get that piece of paper? I had a hard time. Small coffee, sure.
There's three of us.
Well, good afternoon.
Good
all of you.
afternoon.
So this panel includes Catherine Miles Kania, who's the CEO of the Family Justice Center, Cameron Burns, the Director of Community Education at Crisis Services, and Julie Palmer, Executive Director of PATH of Western New York, which is People Against Trafficking Humans. And they represent 3 agencies that really do yeoman's work. I've worked with some more than others, but that's not to take away from the services that anyone provides. I'm grateful that these services are available to the community, and to the extent that I've been able to work with you, I'm very privileged to do that. So thanks for being here, and we'll start where you want.
Hi, everyone. My name is Cameron Burns. I'm the Community Engagement Director at Crisis Services and a Hilbert graduate, 2008, criminal justice. But I began my work years ago at Crisis Services as a domestic and sexual assault victim advocate stationed at the Town of Tonawanda Police Department in the Family Offenses Unit with the Family Offense Detectives and the SOS, the Sex Crimes Detectives, TTPD. Crisis Services does a lot. We're mental health, suicide prevention, those kinds of things. But we're also the Rape Crisis Center, the designated Rape Crisis Center for Erie County, and a domestic violence service provider. One of the many things that we do is we go out to area hospitals 24/7, 365 to assist survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, family violence. Oh no, hot coffee.
Keep going.
Family violence and elder abuse in all 10 emergency departments in Erie County. And then we provide follow-up services, case management services for those domestic and sexual assault survivors. And that includes going to court, helping people testify. I've sat with survivors where we've done controlled phone calls with detectives, helping people find new safe housing, get medication after a sexual assault incident. All sorts of things. So we do quite a lot of victim services in Erie County, work closely with law enforcement, courts, but then also the social services, Department of Social Services aspect.
Hey, good afternoon. How are you? It's a pleasure and privilege to be here. I'm Catherine Miles-Kanya. I'm the CEO of the Family Justice Center. I've been in this role for a little over 2 years. The Family Justice Center was created to really provide wraparound services to anyone who's experiencing domestic violence. People experiencing domestic violence often encounter a broken and fragmented system in which they are navigating law enforcement, the courts, hospitals, other DV providers by themselves. What typically happens is that individual withers away, they start to break down, and they feel wholly unsupported as they go through the journey of trying to deal with this situation. What I come to you today about is specifically about the domestic violence landscape that we're seeing here in Erie County. It should be noted that overall crime, major crimes such as murder in our country and in the state in Erie County is actually down, with one exception, and that's murder of women. And that is an intimate partner violence. That is an inflection data point that needs some attention. What does it suggest? That we as a country and society are seeing a decrease in major crime with one area, which is a gendered crime specific against women. What walks through our doors is an escalating and increasing violence. We receive 6,000 hotline phone calls a year, and those turn into 1,500 active cases. What we are seeing within those 1,500 active cases, however, are rising and escalation danger levels. We provide and we administer danger assessments where we are quantifying the level of danger somebody is in. What that tells us is what is the risk and likelihood of a homicide. We are seeing now about average score of about 22.6, meaning anything over the score of 18 suggests a likelihood of a homicide. My colleagues in the district attorney's office this summer talked about the summer of 2025 as being one of the most violent domestic violence moments in our history in the last 30 years. We are personally aware of 5 homicides that happened in the summer alone. These are things that need to get our attention. One specific area that I do think has some solution is we are seeing an escalating and rising level of strangulation that is happening in this area. It is largely misunderstood. It is largely not recognized or understood as a fatal and homicidal form of domestic violence. We work closely with the Strangulation Institute. They are nationally recognized
I'm sorry,
experts.
What's the institute?
Strangulation
Okay.
Institute out of San Diego. They are the gold standard, 25-year body of research on strangulation, born out of actually the O.J. Simpson case. So because a one-time strangulation increases the likelihood of a homicide by 750%. That is stunning. Problem is, nobody knows how lethal that is. That includes law enforcement, that includes the judiciary, that includes even other DV providers, along with the victims who walk through our doors. Strangulation also drives other forms of violence. Mass shootings is one, and killing of law enforcement in the line of duty is number 2. Law enforcement does not know what they're walking into because of lack of training. It is not lack of not caring, it's not lack of not wanting to be responsible and helpful for the individual. It is truly lack of training of how serious a strangulation case is. So I really believe that one way that we can work together as a state is to really acknowledge that training, a multidisciplinary training is needed in our area where hospital personnel, law enforcement from every municipality, where other DV providers, health department, et cetera, come in to have just a general understanding of what strangulation is, that facility of language, the knowledge, how to then respond, how to adequately support and help has to be understood because we're all operating in silos. The very thing we aimed to do, which was not to contribute to the broken, fragmented system, is in fact what's happening. The silos are happening because we have all different levels of understanding and knowledge of what strangulation is. So I think that universal training is needed. I think baked into that universal training is trauma-informed knowledge of what this looks like. We have too many people who are frustrated by the endemic nature of domestic violence, the recidivism. I'm back to the house again for the 5th time. That is endemic to domestic violence. We need to understand that. But we cannot keep re-traumatizing the victim by saying, why don't you leave him? What's wrong with you? Why would you do that to your children? What do you think that does to a victim? I think general understanding of what DV is with specificity to a strangulation will make the most sense. I also want to talk about the need for staff. Our rising levels of violence are not being adequately managed by the current staff we have in place. My staff are absolutely outstanding. They are excellent. In 1 year's time, our menu of services, meaning our touch points for the 1,500 clients, have almost doubled, and I have the same amount of staff today as I did a year ago. Our forensic medical unit, of which you, Senator, have been very generous in supporting, we have a forensic camera where we are able to capture injuries. So that aids in the prosecution of cases, particularly important for Black and brown women where injuries are not visible. The camera will pick up on those injuries so they have more favorable prosecutorial outcomes. That net piece of equity is also needed. We have far too much disparity between women of color and people who look like me who have more favorable outcomes because of the way that I look. So I think that those are some of the areas that we need to look at. One final point, beyond the training on strangulation and just DV in general. The law is extremely unclear about how we charge these strangulation cases. Most of the cases that walk through our doors, even though they are bordering on a homicidal situation, are charged as misdemeanors, which is a criminal obstruction of breathing charge, not a felony strangulation. That is rooted in lack of training, lack of understanding, and one key word that is becoming the boogeyman, and that is the word stupor. The word stupor in the law is extremely unclear. So your reading of stupor and mine are going to look very differently. So the de facto charge is becoming a criminal obstruction of breathing misdemeanor because we don't understand stupor well enough. Don't understand the 56 signs and symptoms of a strangulation to know how to adequately charge it, so we're undercharging these cases. I have more, but I will turn it over.
We'll come back to that.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me here today. It's really a privilege to be able to speak on behalf of the people that we serve. Again, Julie Palmer, the Executive Director of PATH, which is People Against Trafficking Humans. Our overall mission is ending human trafficking through education, prevention, and restoration. Last year, we educated almost 100 organizations in the community, including schools, law enforcement, other agencies. We do prevention work where we serve victims of a variety of crimes, and then we also work with sex and labor trafficking victims. We have an enrichment center in the city of Buffalo that provides restorative survivor support services, where we offer not only the individual social work support, but a variety of group supports and meeting people where they're at, meeting their physical and psychosocial needs. One of the things that I think I wanted to highlight is that one of the things we see as an issue is what the definition of actually human trafficking is. And according to the legislation in 2000, the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, federal legislation, has dictated that human trafficking is the recruiting, harboring, and transporting a person solely for the purpose of commercial sex or forced labor. And in order for it to be a crime, they have to see evidence of force, fraud, or coercion. Unless somebody is a minor under 18, then they don't need that evidence. And I think that what is happening is that we see these crimes happening, and a lot of the criminal justice system providers and people involved are not sensing or seeing the force, fraud, and coercion involved in a case. So there could be violence or actual threat of violence, fraudulent behavior of promising something and then it's different than what they're told. And then we see a lot of coercion where people are preying on vulnerabilities people have. And what's happening with some of the people we serve is they may be criminalized for prostitution or addiction because they didn't look deeply enough to see that there was force, fraud, or coercion. Fortunately, we do have a human trafficking intervention court in the city of Buffalo that does work to find that, to provide victim services, but I think that we need a broader scope of education and understanding in our entire system to ensure that victims are identified properly and not criminalized. The other aspect of the work that we think is really important is that there is some legislation that's going on right now, I actually saw in the Senate, to include sex offenses, to include human trafficking. One of the things that I'd like to comment on that I've learned from law enforcement is that we also need to prosecute Johns, because I've had local law enforcement tell me that they will find a victim, arrest the purchaser, or the John, but he'll be let go on an appearance ticket because there's not strong enough charges to detain him. So therefore we watch the victim walk out with him because she's too afraid to get our services and leave because of the fact that they both walked out of the police station together. So these are some barriers to what we can do as a provider, because the law limits some of the prosecution of these cases. The other thing that we're observing, whether it's federal or state, is that a lot of these cases have to be prosecuted based on witness testimony of the people we serve. That is incredibly challenging for the fact that it's re-traumatizing, and a lot of times they are threatened. There's been some very high-profile cases in our region. I'm sure that you're aware of some where the FBI did a major sting of the Peter Gerace case, and he was brought out charges and convicted on 8 charges of drug and sex trafficking. Those victims that we served were fearing their lives, and one of them ended up passing by homicide. And so these are things that we just have to consider more seriously when we're looking at how do we have legislation that allows for prosecution of these cases that is not solely relying on a victim story. That is really challenging. The fear, sometimes they don't even self-identify. The other issues that we see as an organization is how to get access to services. So a lot of the issues are they'll lose their identification. That's really one strong way a perpetrator keeps somebody engaged. Whether it's domestic or foreign born, they take their ID. Getting access to anything in the social service system is incredibly challenging. We've done a lot of work to advocate for that, and New York State does have a certification process. There is also crime can get compensation, victims can get compensation. The challenge is that documentation process is a barrier for our clients. So I think if there's ways to allow agencies to be agents and representatives of our clients to get those services would be much more advantageous in helping them to get what they need. The final piece that I wanted to mention is the housing. There is a real barrier to shelter and housing overall, and I'm sure these wonderful women here are going to agree that we lack shelter and housing. Not only are what we have in place in Western New York is currently saturated, but to have trained resources and residential programs specific to the crimes that our survivors are experiencing, specific to understanding DV, specific to understanding how you work with human trafficking, because our clientele has a very different trauma than perhaps a homeless person. And so it's looking at how do we have trained professionals in that. And I'm gonna go as so far as to ask, because we're actually looking at doing a residential program, is that if there is a way for the state, as in other issues like developmental disability, to require regions of town communities to allow for these residential programs. Because the biggest challenge we're having is the pushback in the municipalities that don't want us there. And that has to change. And a lot of it is just because people have wrong information about the clients we serve. They see them as the criminal instead of the victim that needs services. And I'm very passionate about this because we're literally in the middle of this kind of battle. The last piece is that this is a bipartisan issue, and so we love to see anybody in government that wants to get behind this, because we need to work together collaboratively. And there is a New York State task force. I think one of the things I've thought about is that task force is comprised of heads of offices in the state, but I really think they should open it up to providers and put leaders in the communities of the state that are actually doing the day-to-day. And so I think that enhancing that and that task force would be really helpful, particularly in that there's 12 agencies throughout the state. PATH is one who's being funded by the state for trafficking services. So I think including those organizations on that task force makes a lot of sense. And there is a federal task force with which we are looking at being refunded that was recently released. So that's another thing the Western New York District has had for a decade, a federal law enforcement task force with NGOs partnering, and hopefully that'll be back in our region this year. So thank you so much for listening. I appreciate it.
Thank you all. Senator Murray.
I'm going to throw a couple of things out and then just get your opinion on these. And first, I apologize for the distraction here of me watering the stage with my coffee. But first, you bring up housing. And I was just at a ribbon cutting in my district where there was a workforce housing apartment complex that just opened up. 17% of the units were set aside for domestic violence victims. I think, would it be a good idea, just as we require a certain percentage be affordable housing in different projects, should there be some sort of, if not requirement, at least a recommendation that a certain percentage be set aside for domestic violence victims? Before you answer, let me just I'll throw a couple out and then just go. The other thing was, we talk about human trafficking. I'm going to go non-human and talk about pets. There is also a big problem with, especially in domestic violence, with the violent offender threatening, if you leave, I'm going to harm your pet, your animal. A lot of the shelters do not or cannot take pets. Do we need to do more to expand and allow for pets to be allowed at these shelters, and do we need to push harder to make this happen?
Absolutely. So the housing question, and defer to my colleagues on this as well. Yeah, there are really successful models throughout the state of New York where there are a certain percentage of rooms or of housing within a unit dedicated to domestic violence. Having said that, though, I completely agree with my colleague here that I do feel that there needs to be proper staffing for those types of clients. This is a very complex thing that domestic violence is. So just, having a safe harbor, it's actually not enough. You need those wraparound services on site specific to domestic violence, whether it's, the day-to-day grind of living life as a single parent, and it's the threat of violence, it's the recidivism of, it's the safety planning, exactly, recidivism of, he's coming back, I don't know what to do, et cetera, et cetera. So there are really good models here.
Can I just add to that I think there's a twofold, and I don't know if maybe we'll agree, there's the difference between a residential restorative service transitional 12 to 18 month program and then long-term housing. And I think both of those distinctions need to be made, because I think communities are more likely to say, sure, we'll allow for like 5 units. You know, Salvation Army had a conversation with us about that. But having the residential restorative home services in that immediate period after they come out of a situation essentially almost doesn't exist in our region, specific to human trafficking. And every time we try to get one in a community, we have constant pushback. So I think that is really key. And I really think there's a 2-step process, and just being part of conversations with organizations across the country, there's some real advancement in having both a multi-step process from early emergency care to transitional housing to long-term housing, and maintaining support services through that entire experience so they don't end up back in their exploitative situations.
All right, one thing I wanted to mention too is there are, Department of Social Services benefits for housing, and they will work closely with domestic violence victim advocates to get survivors housing benefits, temporary cash assistance to get out and leave an apartment. Great. However, say you have somebody who's never worked, doesn't work, was a stay-at-home parent, and is fleeing domestic violence with their 2 children. They go down to Department of Social Services to get temporary cash assistance to get an apartment, right, to put down money and all that security deposit, all that good stuff. Well, they're given what, I think $625 for an apartment for like a mom and 2 kids. That's like a 3-family household. Where in Western New York, in Buffalo, are you going to find an apartment that's safe, right? Because they just experienced something wholly unsafe. Where are you going to find a safe apartment for $625, right? You're not.
Well, nowhere in the state.
Nowhere in the state, right? So then what are you doing? How are you fleeing this domestic violence situation, right? And where are you going? You've been a stay-at-home mom for the past 15 years, raising your children. What kind of livable wage are you going to be able to make ends meet to leave that situation, right? So while that assistance, that temporary assistance, the TANF assistance is wonderful, it's wholly lacking in what is the realities of 2026 and living and supporting a family. To your pet question, I once worked with a woman who was fleeing a domestic violence situation that had 2 Great Danes. Those are 150-pound dogs, right? And she was not leaving without her Great Danes. We had developed, this was a couple years ago, we had developed a partnership with the SPCA where they could temporarily house their dogs, temporarily house her dogs. But people hear SPCA and hear my dogs are going to go up for adoption, so that was a big barrier. However, there are safe pet programs, like a safe fostering program that does exist through a collaboration with the SPCA and Haven House, I believe, to safely foster dogs and cats until people can get out. But there is a lot of great work downstate. I know in like Rensselaer County where you can actually have your pet in the domestic violence shelter with you. We only have, unfortunately, 1 domestic violence shelter in Erie County, Haven House. It's a 37-bed facility, right? And while they are amazing and do lovely work, 37 beds in a county like Erie County does not come close. So they have to make the tough decisions of who to accept day by day and who not to. There are great other wonderful shelters in Erie County. Cornerstone is locked down, but it's not a secret location. I've been doing this work since 2012. I don't know where Haven House is. None of us should, even providers. There are other great lockdown secure shelters. We have to show 2 forms of ID to get in and all that great stuff, but Haven House is a secret location. And they have to make really tough decisions about who to let in, right? You have to be actively fleeing. If you left 2 weeks ago, well, there's somebody else on the other line that is literally running out of the home right now with nothing on their feet, right? So more opportunities to have safe shelter, like for human and sex trafficking survivors, would be huge. For domestic violence survivors would be huge, right? All of that comes down to increased funding, which is a barrier for a lot of us too because of staffing, right? Domestic and sexual violence victim advocates, we're the Rape Crisis Center. It's a hard job. We sit in the hospital with domestic and sexual assault survivors 24/7, 365. We are responding in the middle of a blizzard. We have the ability to have emergency driving capabilities. We responded in the middle of COVID. It's a really hard job. It's hard physically, emotionally. I spent 10 years of my life responding at 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. And then you still got to go sit in court with a client at 9 a.m. the next day, right? So it's a physically hard job. It's an emotionally hard job. You are literally holding someone's hand during sexual assault evidence collection. It's hard. Turnover and burnout is real in all of these jobs. And being able to keep staff, keep them well paid, keep them supported is always going to be a barrier in these types of jobs. And so, increasing funding for domestic and sexual assault programs, I think, is really critical to keep the people that we have at being able to respond in the way that we need them to, that the survivors need them to, but keeping that breadth of knowledge, keeping someone who's been there for, 6, 10 years, keeping them in the field is important, and we need to recognize that with pay, with funding these programs additionally.
So I don't know if you were all here for the testimony of the prior panels.
Yeah.
But when we talk the different police agencies, how do the different police agencies how do they know about your services? If they do.
Well, we have a long-term I think everybody, crisis services, we do a lot, but we have long-term partnerships we have a domestic violence victim advocate stationed at ECSO, stationed at Buffalo Police Department. We have a couple victim advocates. I was at Town of Tonawanda Police, which is our longest running relationship that's existed since, I believe, the 80s with TTPD, where we have a case manager, domestic and sexual assault victim advocate case manager stationed in the police department. We don't work for the police. We work for crisis services, but we're stationed in the police department to really meet people where they're at, which we had mentioned with the Seneca Nation. We also are stationed around college campuses, so we help the campus police investigations because we believe in meeting people where they're at. Not everybody is going to go to the hospital for us to see them, but maybe they'll come to their police department. Maybe not everybody is going to go to the hospital or police department, but they'll go to their college campus. Well, we're stationed at different college campuses.
So I'm looking at, it dawned on me when you're sitting there. You got 3 agencies doing great work. There's other agencies providing victim services.
It's
but
collaborative.
Do you have not an umbrella organization, some sort of professional affiliation with all the others that might be a central clearinghouse where you get collective
So there's a
information?
couple of different groups. There's the Erie County Coalition Against Family Violence, which I served as the executive communications chair for about 10 years. There's a Rape Crisis Advisory Council, too, that we serve on, that is a collaboration of, we run it as the Rape Crisis Center, but of law enforcement, district attorney's office, PATH, I think, is part of that.
I just want to add, as I mentioned, there's the Western District of New York Task Force, a federal law enforcement task force with NGO and law enforcement partners. So that's how we've expanded our reach and engaging. And actually, I believe Chief Gummo spoke earlier, so Lancaster Police is one of those partners that's on that task force, as well as a lot of others. We, in direct partnership with that task force, the lead law enforcement entity was the Erie County Sheriff's Office. So we've been working in tandem with those organizations. Our goal this year with this being renewed is to hopefully expand that and grow that and have better collaboration and communication and training and understanding, because everybody's doing their job really well, but collectively I think we could work a lot better in understanding victims. So, and as well as the other task forces they mentioned, there's a lot going on in our county.
I was thinking more, as we were discussing, I'm thinking, how does that police officer or deputy on the road that drives to someplace in Colden or Lancaster or wherever, how do they get the information about what's available for victims so that they can say, I can't necessarily help you, I got to go catch the bad guy, but these are the organizations that might be able to help.
I think we need to enhance that.
Thinking is there a way that we can facilitate that?
Yes.
I don't know. It's more to follow for the sake of time.
Yes.
Can we follow up later about that if we can?
Yeah.
Because what we're ultimately going to do, we'll transcribe this and we'll get through all these different points. But I think follow up be necessary just for the sake of us staying on time here. Catherine, strangulation. That institute. How this is something new to me, and I spent like a career in criminal justice.
Yeah.
The data that exists, how far does it go back?
They've been around for about 25 years. So
So do they have 25 years of
yeah,
data?
they would, and they
Okay.
continue, but it's also, the nice thing too is it's also multidisciplinary. So you've got your law enforcement people, you have your medical examiners, you have your other district attorneys, former prosecutors, and then just data heads.
Okay.
And they are working together really to look at sort of the immediate, but also the systemic, but longitudinal strangulation numbers. But from that research, it's not a singular act of violence. It is really fuel to other forms of violence.
No, I
And-
understood your testimony with
so-
that, but
so I
so I'm
think-
very interested in following up.
Which is
on-
why we want all the different disciplines that
Right.
work with
It makes all
domestic
the sense in the
violence
world.
to have that training. It's about a $20,000 training. They need about 100 people when they come into a community, and that 100 people needs to be representative of that cross-section of individual who's working in strangulation.
So regarding the victims that are victimized in the domestic violence case 3, 4, 5 times, the fear of testifying, being afraid of testifying, whether because it's being, they're living through it again, or their fear that they're going to be victimized again by somebody. Was there a point in time that started, like the proliferation of those two things? I mean, is there a difference that might coincide with our discovery laws, with our bail laws? I recognize it's always been somewhat of a problem, but you're both talking about it like we're seeing more of this, and I'm thinking like, why are we seeing? How do we fix, right?
Yeah,
I
I think
and
some
I
of
don't know if
it's
it
the
coincided
evidence.
with anything that we did.
Yeah, I think it's the evidence piece. Prosecution, whether it's Erie County level or federal, there's a frustration because in order to make it a case that's winnable, it often relies on witness testimony. And so I think it's kind of looking at the force, fraud, or coercion, especially particular to human trafficking, and looking for evidences of that with regards to perpetrators. And one last thing, too, that's really important to strengthen legislation is in internet safety. I think we need to definitely hold accountable the internet with aspects of social media and solicitation. The law enforcement, federal entities that we work with have highlighted that's the #1 recruitment grounds. Our minors that we serve, as well as adults, speak to that the primary means not only recruitment, but then posting of them on the internet. And so I know at the federal level, there's entities trying to put in legislation, but I think at the state level, to get firmer laws for social media and internet safety and holding them accountable is really important, because often people get victimized that way, and then there's really no restitution or anything available to them for that.
So that, you brought up a point, accountability. And so I know we're time crunch, so I'll close with this. In your opinion, so follow it through. Someone is in a domestic violence situation or a human trafficking situation, and we get to the point where, okay, we've caught the bad guys. But if they're not punished, I mean,
Right,
is
exactly.
that impeding them coming forward, the victims
Yes.
coming
Yes.
forward to
Yes.
ask for help because they're
Yes.
afraid
Yes.
they're not going to be punished?
And it's
Correct.
frustrating law enforcement, and it's
Correct.
frustrating the DV providers.
Yes.
And we're all frustrated saying, we're having an
right.
existential questioning. Who are we? What are we? What is our
Right.
purpose, right? How do you keep that individual motivated who's bravely walking through your doors? And, we're collecting evidence. We're lucky at the Family Justice Center, we have the ability to collect all that evidence. I have a nurse, I have a petition writer, I have high-risk advocates, I have now an on-site Buffalo Police Department SVU detective who is solely at the discretion of FJC clients. So whatever I can control, I'm trying to control, and we are seeing really good results from that. But once we release it out into the wild, this is where everything starts to fall apart again.
Yes.
And that's the problem. The whole function of my agency is to put a finger in the dam, right? I mean, just say, like, we're going to deal with this broken, fragmented system of which I'll control what I can, but once that person leaves and it gets into sort of, the prosecution phase, that's a problem. And then my problem is compounded by we're undercharging many of these cases. And so there's no accountability for that individual, for the abuser, and there's no ability for restorative justice for that person as well.
Well, you'll be very interested to know, it's a great segue, because our next panel are a couple victims of internet crimes. So that's an
Yeah.
area that we did want to go into, but I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank
I'll
you.
look forward, if I may, to be able to follow up.
Absolutely
With
would
all of
love
you
that.
guys.
Thank you
Yeah,
so much.
Great, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Okay,
Appreciate
thank you
it.
very much.
Thanks, it's nice to meet you.
Like we had a little cushion at the end. Hi.
Hello.
Appreciate you guys being here. How about this? Why don't you introduce yourselves, and we'll save a little bit of time.
My name is Samantha Zora, and I'm an occupational therapy graduate student.
Good afternoon, I'm Stacy Cease, Niagara County Victim Services Coordinator.
My name is Rebecca Rossler. I am a survivor, but I also work for the Niagara County Sheriff's Office as a crime victim advocate, and I'm also an adjunct professor at Niagara University and teach criminology.
Very busy.
Yes.
Well, thank you all for being here. Very much appreciated. I know sometimes the testimony, especially people who have been survivors, is difficult, but I believe incredibly necessary to help others, to help identify some causes and help identify ways that we can address it. So we very much appreciate you, all of you being here. So start where you'd like.
Would you like to start? You want me to? Okay. All right. So I only have a few minutes to speak with you about the 2 years of the darkest period of my life. I was 14 years old.
Would you pull that a little closer?
A little closer?
Yeah, if you would.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. So I was 14 years old back in 2009 when I was groomed online by a young adult male. In 2009, society was really warned of strangers from out of state who would kidnap you, assault you, kill you. That was the big warning label, I guess, so to speak. It started off so innocent. We were both on bowling leagues from the local area, Buffalo fans. He used all of that to gain my trust and manipulate me into thinking that he was a safe person, that he would never hurt me, and that he cared about me, and I believed him. Over the span of about a month and a half, he unraveled, showing his true self. The conversations quickly turned into constant sexual harassment day and night. The manipulation increased tenfold. He'd tell me that he cared about me, and then he'd be coercing me and threatening me into having sex with him. At 14 years old, I didn't know how to handle an adult telling me that he was going to kill himself if I didn't do what he wanted me to do. That was a lot of weight. We met in person 3 times, and each time he had sexually assaulted me. At that point, I couldn't label it as sexual assault. I wasn't, it was all part of that grooming. About 2 months after I first met him, I was informed that he had been convicted of rape of another young girl just 2 years earlier, and he was already a registered level 2 sex offender. The severity of the situation then hit me really hard. I was so fortunate to have such a strong support system in my family, and they stood beside me as we reported to law enforcement. I met with investigators, provided multiple statements, identified him in a photo array, testified at age 15 to a grand jury of 23 strangers to indict him on felony charges. And at age 16, I stood in front of the judge and within arm's length of the predator, and I read my victim impact statement before he was sentenced to prison. While it would be time-consuming to delve into all of the ways that this impacted me, I can simplify it by saying that I was awake of trauma every single day and every night when I tried to sleep. Even though my case had the best possible outcome, I never felt like I did enough to protect others. I went to college to study criminal justice in hopes of becoming a law enforcement-based victim advocate. At age 21, I graduated with my Bachelor's of Science in Criminology and Criminal Justice with honors, all while raising my 2-year-old daughter. And of course, having a child at a very young age, came with its own difficulties. I'd also started my master's degree and graduated with that at age 22. Within all of that, I worked alongside top researchers in the field. I researched projects on local gun violence, perspectives of victim advocates, district attorneys, and judges on victims of sexual assault and domestic violence. And then I started teaching criminology just afterwards. I then was also working at Haven House, the domestic violence shelter in Buffalo, as a domestic violence counselor and hotline staff until I was hired as a crime victim advocate with the Niagara County Sheriff's Office, where I'm still employed today. With this position, each of us advocates offer comprehensive services from for all crime victims. It could be something, as you mentioned, more simple, such as harassment, DWI, child abuse, physical, sexual, kidnapping, domestic violence, homicide victims, and we provide those comprehensive services from the moment a crime gets reported to after the crime gets sentenced, and sometimes even years afterwards we have victims reaching out. So accompaniment to and from court, essentially a lot of things that a lot of these previous panels have already discussed, we are actively doing. We meet with local law enforcement agencies to tell them who we are. We have on-call 24/7. We are in all of the law enforcement agencies across the county and Niagara County, assist with those ERPO hearings, the new red flag laws. We are constantly updated on the new legislations, programs, resources. We're trained in the danger assessment. We're going to start doing ODARA, which is risk assessments. That was also the local research used Niagara Falls police data. So we're going to be trained by those researchers to be looking at the risk levels of and recidivism levels of intimate partner violence for every single domestic report that comes in. I mean, you name it, we've done it from the beginning of a case to the end. I feel like I'm in a very unique position, and I welcome questions from any angle, because not only was I a crime victim, I work as an advocate. I've done the research in the field. I still actively keep up to date on that. And I see a lot of changes that have been made over the past few years that are very disheartening, and have made it very difficult, not only for myself, seeing it as a survivor, but also as someone working in the field and trying to help others. The barriers are just, we have so much evidence-based research. We are so much more trauma-informed, so much data. We need to be using that to really hone in on what we can be doing and what we can be doing better. Abrupt implementations and revisions to the law, such as the Crawford hearings, those are something that we're seeing repetitively that I could not even imagine being in that situation, and having to make those phone calls and explaining to other victims who are going through this. Yeah, there's an order, but it's limited. They're coming home. Oh, wait, they're already home because they've been released that quickly. It's so difficult. Bail reform, the use of appearance tickets, it just looks like a catch and release system, and it is. Bail reform, you could menace a gun at a child and you're going to be released on an appearance ticket. If there's a request for an order, ideally they should be held to see the judge, but even then, they're not going to be held for very long. The legislation and misinformation on stalking needs great improvement. There were little bits and pieces of components of stalking within my situation that I can look back now and see it, but I didn't at the time. The stalking, what is on the books right now is not working. It is near impossible to charge stalking, and then to even get it prosecuted is, there's a B misdemeanor for stalking. That's 90 days. But even if that's what's charged, it's going to be reduced to harassment, and hopefully an order of protection is issued. But the evolutions of stalking have increased so much, and the methods of doing so, and the ability for offenders to get their hands on different things. Raise the age, which we've talked about as well, causes a lot of distress on victims. If an offender in the family court realm, we've had juvenile rape cases, the victim is no longer even able to be in the court to hear what the sentence is of that offender. So you're missing so many different parts where victims are feeling unheard, and just there's so much more distrust in the system. Parole was silently reformed within the midst of all of that bail reform, where a judge's final sentence in court and post-release supervision isn't even what it is, because that can be reduced on good time. So that, again, you're offering confusion, distrust, safety concerns for victims who put so much faith, and it takes them so much to get to that, get to that point where they see a conviction, and then to see that conviction really fall through or be shortened is disheartening. And like I said, I know I'm very thankful for, the outcome that I had in my case. But I also know, especially working in the field, that was rare. And so I really strive to make sure that we can provide the best services to everybody, no matter what type of crime it is, because they deserve it.
Can I just, a couple
Absolutely.
things you said. First off, God bless you. Thank you for being here. Yeah, please.
Thank you.
I appreciate all that you're doing right now in your position, but I want to go back to you as a victim.
Yes.
First, did I hear you correctly when you said he had been convicted of rape? Just, 2 years earlier?
It was 2 years prior. I don't know how correct this information is, but when I was told by investigators at the time that he was actively on probation when he was reoffending.
Okay, so you as a victim, I'm talking to you as a victim.
Yes, absolutely.
How do you feel, and do you feel like other victims just throw up their hands and feel like, when they hear things like, he was convicted 2 years earlier and he's sitting next to you right now, or the revolving door of the bail reform and what that's done, or even family court. In my district 2 summers ago, 2 14-year-olds on a Tuesday afternoon broke into a woman's home, brutally assaulted and raped her, and it went to family court. They got a little slap on the wrist and that was it.
Yeah.
Which, does that, from a victim standpoint, how do you feel about it? But then do you also think that it almost encourages more crime? Because they see, I can get away with it.
Absolutely. There is no doubt in my mind that there was other victims within that period of time while they were investigating my case. I know that there were other reports called in on him, but nothing to my knowledge, and based off of obviously looking through docs records and different things, that he was ever convicted of. But how concerning is that, you have one victim who is willing to step forward, and I don't blame any other victim for not wanting to. It's an awful process. And, that's something that I really took to heart and I struggled with for a long time, is, how many others has he done this to? And now that there's no supervision of him, he's off all supervision. He's still pretty young. And child predators, you can't change somebody's sexual attraction. So even now, sitting here as a victim, looking at it, it makes me sick to think, I know he's still doing it, but now he has no supervision. It's all expired. It's over. Sure, he's on the registry and has to check in, but beyond that, there's nothing else. And you can't rehabilitate or change someone's sexual preference, and that's terrifying.
Samantha?
So when I was in 8th grade, I was 15 years old at the time. I got my first iPhone, downloaded social media, and a boy from school was messaging me on Snapchat. And his messages became increasingly intrusive, asking to see more and more of me, peer pressuring me. Eventually I caved. I sent images of me in my undergarments. The next day at school, people were making fun of me. Apparently that image, along with 40 other girls across different school districts in the area, were all posted on Instagram. So then the following week, knock on the door, Amherst police. They were looking for me. Had no idea what I had done. And so they brought me down to the station. And the officer brought me to this map with a bunch of red dots on it. And he asked me, he was like, "Do you know what these red dots mean?" And I was like, "Nope." And he was like, "These are all the registered sex offenders in the area, and you are now on the radar due to that photo." So, became upset, went home, didn't know what to do, went to school, was bullied probably the rest of the school year, if not more, into high school. The other girls, also same thing, school counselors. They were kind of making me the issue at most. They were like, "Why do you feel like you had to send the photo?" Stuff like that. So I just felt like it was handled very poorly. And then not having that peer support definitely affected my school and stuff like that, so
What happened to the person that was doing this?
nothing.
No charges.
Nope.
You know why?
I don't. I don't know if it was because it was online. I know it wasn't taken seriously because it didn't happen at the school. Like it happened while I was at home, but there were no charges.
So good news, we have passed legislation in the last year or two, very much cracking down on that. I'm just worried about we haven't done enough on the punishment end of it to deter it. So I think we still have our work cut out for us, but we have made it so that doing such things will be a crime now. So maybe it wasn't at the time, I don't know, but it's disheartening to hear that.
Thank you.
Thank you for telling your story.
Thank you.
You're good?
I'm good.
Okay. Probably already answered this, but I'm wondering, do either of you know, I mean, could you say, should there have been, not should there have been, what types of things could have prevented your victimization? And I don't mean you, I mean as far as laws, policies. Is there something that there could be a law change? We know now, I think, I don't know the exact year this happened to you, but the law has changed to catch up with that bad behavior that the individual can now be charged. But are there some, I mean, could it be an internet policy? Could it be a law? Like, what do either of you think could have prevented your victimization, if anything, but solely from the law and policy side? Not what you guys did side.
Sure. Okay. So one of the things that has been passed within recent years was Aaron's Law, and that, I'm not sure if you're familiar, but that is educating children on sexual abuse, and I think that's something that is so huge, and I'm so glad New York State passed it, because at the time I couldn't even identify what was happening to me. But had I been, been told or explained, here's what it is, here's what to do for help, it's not your fault, those sorts of things I think would be so helpful. I think having the registry is a great start. I think that kind of, my grandma was actually the one who said we should look to see if he's on the registry, and what made her do that day when she found out kind of who this person was, I don't know, but I'm so thankful that she did, and so that was a huge help. I think, is there ever going to be enough time for a perpetrator? No, especially when you see now at this point there was 2 victims that he's been convicted of, and you're not even talking about dozens, probably hundreds of other individuals that he's tried to victimize. I think internet safety is, if there was a way some legislation could strengthen that, absolutely, because, similarly, because mine was also through internet communication, there's very little protection. You can do anything online, and it's a scary place, and a lot of people don't realize that, and it's evolving so quickly, we can't keep up with that pace. So if there was anything that could happen, harsher penalties for it being online. I don't know what specifically could be done, but.
Okay, thanks.
Absolutely.
Rebecca, you said yourself that it was the best possible outcome, which still isn't great. I recognize that. But your experience as far as who might have been there, what types of victim services were there throughout the way, could you just talk about that, good, bad, what could have been better? if you will?
Absolutely.
And then Samantha, you obviously didn't have anybody providing any services. It sounds like it was textbook how not to do things by your side. But could you just tell, if you've given it thought, what you think, what would have been the best way for you as a victim? What would have served you well if there were services available? And it doesn't matter who goes first.
Well, I was told to, my parents were told to get me a counselor outside of school to help understand why I sent those photos. So I feel like on the school's end, if they were more willing to see me as a victim versus an offender, I guess, would have been helpful. And then, I had to go to school with the kid the next week. He was in school, so that was also hard seeing that he was walking.
So the
there.
authorities' reaction was more that you were wrong.
Yes.
As opposed to
Yes,
this other
especially
guy's bad behavior.
Yeah, especially the police officer who was on my case.
Are you aware of anybody else who's had this experience since that maybe some things have improved?
I'm not aware of anyone.
Okay, thanks.
Interject. So as the service provider in Niagara County, we get a lot of pushback that that's just not something we can prove that they posted, right? That's something that gets told to victims all of the time. And I do think if there is more money for investigating the types of crimes that use technology and AI and other sources to coerce people into this behavior that is no fault of their own, but they're manipulated into doing these things, then accountability can then happen. That's my input.
All right, back to the question, Rebecca.
I was very fortunate. So I'll start by saying this. The parts of the crime happened in Niagara County and parts of the crime happened in Erie County. So when it had kind of went back and forth crossing borders, both counties were kind of like, well, you take it. No, you take it. No, you take it. How about no, we prosecute in both counties because multiple crimes happened across the board here. So I was very thankful for Niagara County, who did pick up the case. Erie County did eventually, but I think it took a little pushing and prodding. And so the advocate with the Sheriff's Office for Niagara County was there with me throughout the entire process, throughout grand jury, sentencing, the whole 9 yards. She was there through all of it, not only for me, but for my family, providing us resources. I was linked with the Child Advocacy Center for counseling. So I had a really great experience with Niagara County. Erie County, I don't remember meeting with anyone. And even, so the sentencing that I went to and spoke at was actually in Amherst. And as I mentioned, I was an arm's length of the perpetrator. I could have reached out and touched him. I should never have been that close. I was 16 years old. So that's something that, I feel like just was missed. I should never have been in that close proximity. I understand courtroom constraints and whatnot, but they could have very easily moved him further away from me. So I really didn't have a huge, I didn't feel very confident with Erie County. But Niagara County, all of the investigators I worked with were great. The district attorney's office, the advocate, Child Advocacy Center, they all really worked well together to make sure that I was taken care of, which is why I also see how fortunate I am, because I saw in Erie County how that didn't happen.
I just have one follow-up on going back to the internet issue. Do you think it would have been helpful if there was a law in place that would allow you to reach out? If, say, for example, a police report's filed or something that allows you, the victim, to reach out to the internet service to say, I want that photo. That's mine. You need to take it down. Requiring, in other words, giving you more control over something that's yours. Would it be helpful? And I know it's a slippery slope and it would be tough, but That's why I say if there maybe was a police report filed, if it's gone to that extent, you now have the ability and control to say to, whatever internet service it's on, to say, look, I'm this person, you need to take that down, it was not authorized. Would that have been helpful, or do you think it would be helpful?
I think it would be. I don't know how it would be enforced. But yeah, I think it would be helpful.
There is an agency that is able to do that, and I can't think of the name. NCMEC, right? NCMEC. And you are able to ask for pictures to be taken down, and they will kind of do the research and try to get rid of those images from online. But I think if there was a law and enforcement behind that, that would be phenomenal.
Outside of what we've talked about so far, if you could say the state should do this to help victims like you, or to prevent further victimization, is there anything else that you would say that we ought to advocate policy-wise or law change-wise that we haven't talked about?
I think
if you prefer just to provide us the list, that would be fine as well.
Yeah.
We didn't include it.
I think, keeping some of those harsher punishments, like the post-release supervision, if his post-release supervision was cut like it would be nowadays, that would have been so disheartening, because I know he did violate over the course of those 10 years. He went back upstate and came out, and went back upstate and came out. So, to ensure that sort of thing isn't happening, especially for these offenders that we know are going to recidivate, I think that's something that I would really push for. I understand absolutely, being fair and everything, but, we also need to protect people.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
We appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Good luck with everything. Well, I'd like to thank everybody who testified today, and I want to remind everyone that I recognize that we may not have been completely comprehensive in touching all the areas of criminal justice that might provide victim services or touch crime victims, but this is done in conjunction with other roundtables across the state, where we'll take everything and bring it together, and then ultimately the end result will be policy recommendations of how we believe, anyway, that New York State can provide better services to victims and reduce victimization. They'll ultimately be available for anybody interested. You can always ask and we can follow up, or on our website, which is really easy to get to. You just go find the state senate, nysenate.gov, and you can look for our faces and link on that. But I do want to thank everyone who testified, everybody who played a role in setting this up, and then those of you that sat and were interested and concerned about what goes on, and pay attention, and hopefully some good can come out of this. And I also want to thank my partner here, Senator Murray, for traveling from Long Island, and again, threading the needle on the snow, and we hope that you get safely home the same way.
I was going to say, we'll see. The jury's still out on that. But fingers crossed. But thank you to everyone, especially those who came forward. And I don't know if this is actually on. Okay, I'll just project. Thank you for everybody for coming out, especially those who provided the testimony. This has been very, very helpful. Like I said, we did our first one on Long Island. I think we have another one coming in the Hudson Valley area. But each time I've done it, I've heard something else and something different and sometimes very disheartening, but things that can help us to hopefully put forward, as Pat said, legislation or policy initiatives that can make it better. So we want to continue working with you. So always feel free to reach out to either one of us or anyone in our conference. And thank you again for sharing your stories. Thank you.
Yeah, and I did neglect to say, if anybody had anything to add that we haven't connected with yet, you can reach out to our office. You can send something by email and just get the information to us that we would include. Thanks, everybody.